Okay, so we're doing the portrait, and you can see me working incredibly fast, which is not really how fast I'm working. This is about an hour's long one shot portrait. I'm not zooming in or out on this. I'm using one brush, which is a chalk brush. You might be able to see the shape of it. I decided to go with a dark red background instead of black. I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but I just did. And I'm using the biggest brush I can manage to essentially put in location of everything that I think I'm going to need, and I'm trying to quickly get all the colors that I might be able to use into the portrait at once. What you really want to do is see everything that's going to be there, no matter how rough it is, and it will be rough for quite a long time. When you do your own portrait, you're welcome to switch brushes, you're welcome to make the image larger or smaller, however you want to go with it. Um, but I decided that I would just attempt to do this at one scale, not zooming in for details, not zooming out or flipping it horizontally, or I don't even think I set any guidelines up on this. You see me occasionally just taking a mouse pass over the original photograph, and I'm just trying to feel direction in my stylus where things might need to go. The lights and darks aren't always perfectly related at this point in a painting, and honestly, the best thing you can do for yourself is just stay relaxed and stay loose, and not try too hard to get exactly what you're looking at. Again, the goal is to make a painted portrait. It'd be really pretty straightforward to reproduce this photograph almost exactly with airbrush tools and so on, and using the portrait itself as a background layer. But I'm not anxious. In fact, I really don't want you to do a paint over. I want you to use the tools at hand, um, and see if you can just reproduce what you see as best as you can. Where I want things to move more smoothly together, I'll just change the opacity on the brush. And you can see that I'm uh, putting in a lot of values and colors that aren't quite exact representations of what I see in the painting or in the photograph. When I see something and I think it's going to work, I will push at it, and not for the last time you see me starting to get a little bit more serious about the mouth. I knew coming in this was a difficult mouth to paint. Um, just recognize that I was going to have problems with it, and I accept that, and move on and just do the best that I can with it. Occasionally I'll find a new color that I think will be useful for my painting, and so I'll go pick a new color, but as much as I can I'm sticking with what I've got. And you can see the decision now was that I had the eyes a little bit close together, so I move them apart. I'm working on two layers, a background layer and then the image layer. And I'm going to suggest that you do the same thing. I want you to learn that you can certainly make changes anytime you want to make changes. And if something's not quite right, especially in Photoshop, it's not the end of the world. We have a lot of tools at hand. If you do have to move something a lot, like I did there with the eye, then you just go back and you fill the seam by matching colors nearby. You probably can't see, but I'm working anywhere between 12% opacity and 55, 60. Occasionally I go higher. I have my index finger on the Alt or Option key, depending on what kind of computer you're using, and then I will select my opacity just by using the number keys. So I can keep my left hand moving, that's my drawing hand, and I can keep making artistic decisions, and I don't do a lot of stuff with pull down menus, I just grab them. So I use the hotkeys and I can save myself a lot of trouble. You don't see green if you look carefully at the photograph, maybe, but I had a sensation of this sort of olive green here and there. And because I like colorful paintings, I thought I would attempt to use it in the places on the photographic image where I had the sensation of green. And I think working with complementary colors, in this case red and green, is a good idea. My base color is kind of a tan. It's really a version of red-orange, moved way over to neutral. Traditionally, portraits are kept in the very, very neutral range as long as possible. Many of your source photos have beautiful bright colors in them, and you can go right at them, but I recommend that you try to think about where you want planes to recede and making those planes more or less a neutral version of the color that you want. It's a lot easier to brighten up a dull area than it is to sort of try to dull down a bright area, in my opinion. I'm not working a lot with facial structure here from knowledge. I'm really reproducing the lights and darks that I see, because my guy's lit in a kind of a funny way. He's looking slightly down. You can tell by his ear position. He's lit from the front right, and he's got a sort of bounce light on his front left. This was the only photo I could find where the near side, such as it is, my model's left side, is lit and the far side is less lit. Photographers tend to like to light the far side for some reason, and in painting that's the opposite of what one tries to do. But this is a picture I found on the internet, and I thought I could just use it, and it was lit close to what I would do in the studio. There's a ton of hits and misses in the demonstration, and that's the process. You do have hits and misses. You do things that look bad or that don't appeal to you as you're working, and the goal here is not to fix every mistake as you see it. The goal is to keep working all around the face and do those things that are going to help you, and then move on. If you see an element that you think, wow, I got to fix that right now, that's fine. Go ahead and fix it. But you don't want to get yourself too worked up. I notice my timeline here, I'm at almost 8 minutes, which means I'm at almost 16 minutes of a drawing or a painting that actually took me an hour. And it feels like I've covered a lot of ground, but as you can see, it doesn't actually look like my sitter. In fact, I think I get to the end of this and it still doesn't look like him, but it's a pretty good painting. What happens at that point is up to you. You can use some transform tools or even the liquify tool and start pushing things around and getting them a little bit more where they go. You can pull in guidelines. If I wanted a genuine, accurate likeness of this chap, I'd have guidelines pulled in from the rulers on both the painting and the source photographs, so that I could keep things together. In fact, I remember when I first watched this demo, I was thinking, oh my God, you're gonna fix that, right? That's too low, that's too high, he's not wide enough. It looks like a white version of this Asian guy. Just a lot of things went through my head, but I remember thinking, well, this is the process, and I don't really think it's completely fair to someone trying to figure out how to do things to just do it absolutely perfectly all the time and practice it so many times that you don't ever make a mistake. I don't really think that's the artistic process, and it's certainly not mine. I make lots of mistakes, and I do lots of things that aren't really accurate to what I'm seeing, but mostly what I'm trying to do is find an edge. In this case, you saw me just fill in the top edge of his eye and try to recreate that shape, and then look at all the shapes around it and try to do the same thing. I will normally work with a pretty broad brush. I won't try to do a line drawing, for example, on a portrait image. because it just doesn't feel like part of the painterly process. There are painters who do a very careful line drawing and then basically set about filling it in with the right colors and values and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that's not a way to go, but I think that this way is useful. It's extremely educational when you're thinking about creating your own characters if you just start with the head and neck shape. The other thing I noticed halfway through this particular painting was that I had selected a guy who you couldn't really see his neck and shoulders, and I think it's more you get a better shot at aspect and likeness if you can include those things. But that's not the end of the world either. I mostly wanted you to see just me plugging away, trying to settle on what some of the shapes I was seeing were, how they related one thing onto another. And at this point, you can tell I'm almost exclusively working with colors that are in the painting. So I've been working away here in real time for about 20 minutes, 22 minutes. And now almost everything I'm going to need is in that painting as far as color. And I'm just trying to set up shape and figure out where the shapes actually go in relation one thing into another. As I need more detail or I need things to be a little more clear, I will reduce the shape of the brush. So here I am trying to figure out what am I going to do about this guy's hair. He has salt and pepper hair. It's black with gray, and it's going to be not something that's going to be incredibly easy to do. So I take a pass at it. I think, oh boy, that's going to be a problem, and then I move away to sort of keep myself flowing and do things that I know I can do. So now I'm down in the collar of the jacket. I'm trying to see. I recall when I was doing this I had glare on my screen. It's very difficult to see down there, but I didn't make it a big deal. I can set my opacity quite low with this chalk brush, and I can get some of the transitional sort of textures that are in this blue denim shirt pretty readily. And just by adding a little light color to it that I pick out of his hair, I can put some of those highlights, and I think I get a reasonable illusion of what's going on there. So nothing is a panic. Everything is a question of, is this movement straight? Is it slightly angled? Does this have definition? How am I going to make that definition? Looking at it now, I notice a whole litany of things that I probably should have made notation of, and maybe, I can't recall exactly, but might not even get to by the end of this painting. And I may do a little addendum. I don't know. It depends on how much I believe in your capacity to watch these demos for 20 minutes. If I added another 5-minute demo at the end, I think I could squeak this thing into a really good likeness, as opposed to just really what it is a painting that's based on this gentleman, and it's certainly not a perfect likeness. What my hope is for you is that you will do all of the preliminary work and get it close, and then walk away from it. Give yourself enough time so that you don't even look at it for a couple of hours or even a full day, and then come back and make your fixes, so that part of it, once you get all the basic stuff where you want it to be, that last part should only take you half an hour. If you're like me, you'll tell yourself it's going to take you a half an hour, and then you'll probably spend an hour on it, coming back and doing these little small things. You can see me once again attacking the mouth, just trying to figure it out. I remember Sargent's famous saying, which is a portrait is a painting that has something wrong with the mouth, and you can see me really struggling to get this in the right location, but I move it up. It leaves a seam. That's not a problem. I'll be picking all the colors next to the seam, and I'll just paint around this. And while I'm doing it, if I see anything that I can alter or change, in it goes. I'm going to make that transition as well. But this is getting a little better on one side. who knows if I have it placed left or right correctly. I'm still on the fence about that. But I do have this kind of unusual mouth shape, a little bit more like what I had in mind when I started. This guy's mouth actually is in a very slight smile, and his smile is kind of like the smiles that children draw. It goes down and it goes back up, which is a little bit unusual, going corner to corner. So that was part of the appeal of trying to get at this painting. He also in the photograph has, he's shaven, but you can see his beard start to come back through the skin, and the temptation is always, draw lots of little dots for that beard. And what I'm going to suggest for that kind of thing is just try to assess the value of it. So you can see on his upper lip I've made these sort of blue tones that I think are reminiscent of the value of that very close close cut beard, I guess you would call it, or uncut beard just beginning to grow. Now I'm back up around the eyes and I'm trying to relate one eye to another and do just enough. If I need a thin line and I have room, what I can do is I can draw a thick line, and then on the far edge of that thick line I can bring it down to a thin line by finding that shape. So for the line underneath his eye, I can draw that red pretty thickly and then make it a much thinner line by getting the flesh tones on his cheek. Here I am again trying to arrive at that light, very light portion of skin that's just above the mouth, the upper lip, and trying to use that to groom his upper lip into shape. I'm now about 34 minutes into the painting itself, and I'm starting to get to where I can do some of the fun stuff. I'm pleased that, some of the look of my character is starting to occur. And you now see how much goody one gets by putting those bright photographic light reflections in the eyes. Suddenly they come alive, and for me that's always an exciting part of any painting. I've been leaving the eyes kind of just generally, drawing them in a general way, and then I'll come in and I'll put those in, and suddenly they seem like a real person's eye. Light will hit both cheeks, and the rule of thumb is that the light on the far cheek is very similar, if not exactly the same, in terms of value, if as it is on the lit cheek. It's just simply a different hue, which will appear to be darker. You can notice that I'm avoiding a lot of things. I had been avoiding these eyebrows for a very long time, and looks like I'm going to continue to avoid them. Because they were very thin, actually. They're wide, but there's not a lot of hair in there, not a lot of density. So I knew that getting that idea across was going to be problematic, and I'm kind of saving it. I wouldn't suggest that you have to wait and wait and wait on something like eyebrows. In fact, you put everything in that you can, that you feel you have a good sense of, as quickly as you can. I was just sort of leaving it alone because I knew I was going to have difficulty with it. And now I'm using a very transparent brush because I'm very, very careful here. I'm not really sure what it is that I need to do, and so I'm bringing these things up fairly slowly. He did have that crease on his eye, and I knew I was going to have to deal with it, and I finally just said, oh, forget it, and just drew it in as that long straight shape that you see. This is experimental now. I'm taking a smallish brush, but not too small. It's not the dimension of the hairs themselves, and I'm trying to put it in a sort of I don't know, almost casual way. I can't really tell the edges of his head, and because he's got a black background I'll never know what it was, so I had to be a little inventive here. And same thing up here. What I'll do is when the hair crosses the skin, I'll draw the hair, and then I'll use the same brush and find the skin color and draw back into the hair to try to get that sense of transparency. I did notice that if I went to a small brush now, I could start getting a sensation of the kind of hair that he has. So you see me wiggling around here with a fairly small, actually very small for this painting, brush that's about the width of the hair that I'm seeing. And I'm working fairly loosely, but kind of carefully. I'm trying to really keep my eyes on the photo and keep my eye on my painting at the same time. The transition between hairline and skin, as you see on the left side of this portrait, is very subtle. It's more subtle than you might imagine. And so I'll bring those skin tones with my brush right into the hairline. Kind of doing the same thing here with these difficult eyebrows. Trying to paint them, not overdo it, not paint every single hair that I can see. And eventually I'll work back into it with the flesh tones that are right around the eyebrows and try to get that sense of transparency. I'm about 42 minutes into this painting now, and just finalizing things. Everything after this is a matter of just changing the shape and the arrangement of things, just slowly getting things to be a little bit more satisfying. And as I said, this is the time when you walk away, take a day or two or an hour or two, come back to it and make your fixes later. Okay, go to it and good luck. I know you're going to do a great job.